In qualitative research, the thing that separates a truly groundbreaking study from one that just fizzles out, it often comes down to the mistakes we manage to avoid. So in this explainer, we're going to flip the script. We're turning a list of common pitfalls into an actual blueprint for building research that has real credibility and, honestly, real impact.
And that really is the question, isn't it? What's the secret sauce? The difference isn't just about sidestepping a few errors here and there. Nope. It's about intentionally and deliberately building integrity and rigor into every single step of your process, from start to finish.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll walk through 4 key stages of the research build. We'll start with the blueprint, then get into the actual construction or execution. After that, we'll talk about securing the whole structure with trust and rigor. And finally, we'll cover how to tell the story of what you found and how to do it right. Okay, first things first, the foundation. Just like building a house, if you have cracks in your initial research plan, the whole project can be compromised before you've even started collecting data. It's that important. The 2 biggest mistakes you can make right at the beginning are actually tied together. See, a lack of conceptual clarity, just rushing in without a solid plan, it usually happens because there's this pressure to just get the data already. But here's the thing. Great qualitative research isn't a race. It's a process that needs room to breathe and evolve. So the solution is really twofold. First, you've got to plan intentionally. Get your purpose, your questions, and your methods all lined up from day one. And second, you have to embrace the fact that insights will emerge over time. Build that extra time in for thinking and rethinking. It pays off, I promise. All right, so with a solid blueprint in hand, we can move on to the construction phase. Section 2 is all about errors in data execution, the hands-on work of actually gathering and making sense of your data. This is such a perfect way to think about it. You could have the best research plan in the world, but if your questions only scratch the surface, if they only get you that thin data, your whole analysis is going to be shallow. It's like seeing just the tip of the iceberg. So how do we get to all that rich, meaningful stuff that's hiding below the surface? Oh man, we have all been there. You ask what you think is a really great, thoughtful question, and you get a response like this. It was difficult. It's a closed door, a brick wall. It gives you almost nothing to work with. But watch what happens with one simple little follow-up. A probing question. This phrase, tell me more about. It's like the magic key. It unlocks that door and opens up the conversation to the rich stories and lived experiences you're actually trying to understand. So this really shows the 2 sides of the execution coin. On the data collection side, we avoid getting that superficial stuff by really building rapport and using those powerful open-ended probes. Then, for analysis, we have to remember that software is a tool, but it doesn't do the thinking for us. Coding is just the first step. It's organizing. The real insight, the magic, happens in the deep interpretation. A great way to do this is by writing analytical memos, basically notes to yourself where you start to connect the dots and explore emerging ideas. Okay, section 3. Now we're talking about the steel beams of your research project, trust and rigor. These are the things that make sure your work is not just interesting, but truly credible and able to stand up to scrutiny. I absolutely love this idea. Trustworthiness isn't some box you check off at the very end. It's a continuous, disciplined practice that you have to weave into every single phase of the study, from the moment you design it to the final write-up. And a huge part of this is something called reflexivity. In qualitative research, you, the researcher, you are the instrument. So think of reflexivity as the process of constantly checking and cleaning your lens. For instance, let's say you're studying burnout right after you left a really toxic job. It's totally possible you might unconsciously focus more on the negative stories from your participants. Reflexivity is the practice of recognizing that potential bias and then actively working to make sure your lens isn't distorting the picture you're seeing. So how do you actually do it? Well, here are 3 really concrete ways to practice it. 1, keep a reflexive journal to track your thoughts, your feelings, and your decisions. 2, be transparent about your positionality in your writing. Let people know where you're coming from. And 3, talk it out with a peer. Find someone who can challenge your assumptions and help you see your own blind spots. It's incredibly valuable. Now, all of this feeds into a classic framework for trustworthiness. To make sure your findings are credible, that they're believable, you can use strategies like member checks. That's where you literally go back to your participants and ask, hey, does this interpretation sound right to you? Or you can use triangulation, looking at a question from multiple data sources, maybe interviews and observations. For transferability, you provide that thick, rich description we keep talking about. And for dependability and confirmability, you create an audit trail, a super clear record of your steps and decisions, so anyone can see exactly how you got to your conclusions.
And that brings us to our final section, how you tell the story. You can do everything else right, but if you stumble here and misrepresent your findings, you risk undermining all that hard work. This is a big one. Probably one of the most common errors is confusing the goal of qualitative research with quantitative. Look, in our work, we are not trying to generalize our findings to an entire population. That's not the point. Our goal is transferability. We provide such rich, detailed context that the reader can look at our study and decide for themselves if the findings might be relevant or transferable to their own unique situation. So the bottom line is this. We have to avoid just dropping quotes into our report without any context. They need that thick description to give them real meaning. And we've got to resist that temptation to make these huge, sweeping claims. Instead, we stay grounded. We anchor our interpretations in the specific, lived experiences of our participants, and we're totally upfront about the scope and limitations of our work. So let's bring this all home. Becoming a high-quality qualitative researcher isn't about memorizing a checklist of things to avoid. It's about cultivating a thoughtful, disciplined, and reflective practice. If you take anything away from this, let it be these 5 things. 1. Plan intentionally right from the start. 2. Engage deeply with your participants to get that rich data. 3. Document everything rigorously to build trust. 4. Reflect continuously on your role in the process. And 5, and this is maybe the most important, always honor the context and the participants, whose voices are the absolute heart of your work. And that leaves us with one final, and I think critical question to ponder. In this kind of work, you are the research instrument. The most important thing you can build is a clear lens. So the question you should take with you is this: how are you going to keep yours clean?